Welcome to Notable Approvals. I am attorney Amanda Shaffer. I have another interesting asylum case to talk about today. If you saw us yesterday, our notable approval was about the asylum and the exception to the one-year filing deadline. Today's case is notable because the asylum claim that was approved was based on imputed political opinion. What that means is that the client's persecutors assumed that our client had a particular political opinion. It doesn't mean he actually had that opinion. So it makes the case a lot harder because generally in a public opinion asylum case, you're going to have proof of membership in some type of political group, whether it's a membership ID card or a letter from the political party affirming membership. But when an opinion's imputed on you, you may not even hold that opinion. And it's usually imputed based on some type of relationship, like your family relationship, your ethnicity, or your business association. The case I have today was about a client whose imputed political opinion was based on his business association with someone in the Tamil ethnicity. So my client is a native and citizen of Sri Lanka. And the political opinion that he was imputed to have was that of an LTTE supporter. The LTTE Tamils are a designated terrorist organization in Sri Lanka that is primarily made up of the Tamil people. And if you ask the Tamil people, they're going to say, no, we're not terrorists. We're a separatist organization because the Sri Lankan army has been alleged to have committed a lot of crimes against the minority Tamil population. And at the time my client's trouble started in 2011, there was a brutal civil war going on between the LTTE and the Sri Lankan army. So he kind of got caught up in it, even though he wasn't an ethnic Tamil himself. So he was persecuted by the government itself, by the Sri Lankan army. And it all started because he owned a rental car company for tourists. And in the early 2000s, his business wasn't doing good. So he listed an ad in the newspaper to sell one of his vans. The man who answered the ad was an ethnic Tamil. And they entered into an agreement that said that the title would not transfer to the purchaser until the payment for the van was paid in full. So kind of like a lease to buy agreement. In 2006, the purchaser defaulted on the payment and absconded with the vehicle. So my client went to the police, he made a report, they didn't really do anything. He went on his way and moved on with his life. 5 years later, the civil war is going strong. He gets a knock at his door, and it's the Sri Lankan army. And they say, look, we found your van, because remember, title never transferred since the guy just stole the van. We found your van. It was being used by the LTTE. We believe you support the LTTE. They took him with them. They dragged him out of his home, brought him to an army detention camp, interrogated him, beat him for 10 days. They wanted names of people. They said, why did we find your van there? And he's like, look, I had nothing to do with this. Like, the guy stole my van. The only relationship I have with this guy is he bought a van for me. I had an agreement for him to buy my van. He had proof of this, and the army wasn't buying it. This is a typical of what happened in Sri Lanka during this time period. And eventually he was released 10 days later, and that was only when his family paid a bribe. And they also conditioned his release that he had to report back once a week to the army camp, and that he needed to get that police report from 2006. So my client goes to the police station. They're like, look, we don't have the report anymore. So he was scared to go check in, because if he checked in with the army without the report, they're just going to detain him again. So he and his family, his wife and kids, they fled the home to like 150 miles somewhere else in Sri Lanka. And the neighbors told them that the army came back to look for them when he didn't report in. And then they actually issued a warrant for his arrest under the PTA, which is the Prevention Against Terrorism Act in Sri Lanka. It's a draconian, controversial law that oftentimes is used as an excuse to detain a political opponent. And it was used time and time again, and it's still in effect in Sri Lanka. So my client happened to have a B1, B2 visa. Oh, I forgot. They actually did find them when they first relocated. The Army came in, beat him in front of his wife and kids, and then only agreed to leave when they said they would pay them more money. And my client was given a week, but he knew he and his family didn't have more money to bribe the Army, so they had to do something. Now, my client had a B1, B2 visitor visa already. Unfortunately, his wife and kids did not. So he left the country since he was the main target, came to the US, filed for asylum. His family, in the meantime, were forced to, relocate every once in a while. They would get calls from the neighbors, Army's still looking for you. They found them when they were at the mother-in-law's house. So it was really stressful for a number of years. So our client comes to the US, files for asylum within the 1-year filing deadline. But because there was a backup in interviews, there's a huge backlog, especially then. By the time he went to his asylum interview, there was changed country conditions. And that means that there was a new government in Sri Lanka. So the US government was saying, well, we believe you that you were persecuted in the past and that it was done by the Sri Lankan army because of this imputed political opinion that you don't really have. But there is a new president now, so you should be fine. Well, I'll get to what happens in a second, but it is very hard to get your case approved at the asylum office. Very few do because they generally just refer it to the immigration court. So because of that, they wouldn't approve it. It was sent to the immigration court. Now, he applied for asylum in 2012, and we didn't go back to court for the final hearing until 2019. By the time 2019 came around, country conditions changed again. In fact, they never really changed. The person that took over used to be with the old political party with Rajapaksa. That was I think the president or prime minister. I can't remember. I think it was the president. And the Rajapaksa family is like some dynasty in Sri Lanka that has a real big grip on politics there. And they're also accused of a lot of war crimes during the Civil War. So someone that was really high up in his party broke off, formed a new party, won the election, but then appointed the brother who was like in charge of the army as his like prime minister. It was, I might be slightly misstating it. Bottom line is Rajapaksas didn't go anywhere. Their power never really changed hands. And even if you argued it did, it changed back. So we had plenty of evidence that was recent that my client cannot go back, that his family was still kind of changing where they were as much as they could. The army was still looking for him because the army never changed. And there was still that threat to his life. And I made 9 pages of questions for my client getting ready for this trial. We were really pumped up because I felt like this was one of those times that the changed country conditions worked in his favor. And unfortunately, we've had cases where it's the opposite because unlike a criminal trial, there's no right to a speedy trial in immigration court. So in a case like this, where 7 years pass between the time you file and the time you have, finally get granted, that's actually unfortunately normal because of the backlog. And just like in a criminal case, you have witnesses who die, evidence goes stale, witnesses forget. And most importantly here is that conditions can change in a country. And once we prove that the client is eligible for asylum, the attorney for the government has a chance to prove that even that, though that's the case, it is now safe for him to return. Once your asylum is granted, you don't have to worry about changed country conditions. Technically they can revoke it. I've never heard of that. And once you get your green card, they can't. But that's for another day. But bottom line is you don't have that risk. But if you haven't had it granted yet, no matter how strong your claim is, if that threat that existed in your country, which is why you applied for asylum, no longer exists, then you're going to have to prove that there either something else is there that's a threat to you or that it's not really what it seems. So we were all ready with this 9 pages of questions. And because the asylum office found my client credible about his claim, And because I submitted all the evidence in advance of the changed country conditions, or change and then another change in country conditions, we didn't actually have to ask him any questions. The government attorney agreed, and the judge granted his asylum in about 5 minutes. So it was notable for how short it was and how the country conditions, I was so worried for this case. I have other Sri Lankan cases I'm still worried about, but right now, like I said, country conditions are not great over there. But, that's the thing with asylum. It can change, and hopefully one day we'll fix this backlog and people will not have to wait this long so they don't run into these problems. But it's a very real issue now, and is really another reason, if you need one, to hire an attorney when you first file the asylum application. Because if you have the correct evidence when you file, although right now they're doing it within 30 days, or supposed to be doing it within 30 days, your interview, even if you end up waiting a few years, your attorney will make sure, if any country conditions change, that you have that stuff with you, and that your best chance is getting granted at the asylum office, because once you get referred to immigration court, you have to expect a long wait and the possibility of these issues that come up when trials are dragged on. And best part for this client is, now that he was granted asylum, he was able to file an I-730, or a follow to join petition, to bring his wife and children here. That has to be filed within a year of, that one has to be filed within a year of granting it. Or is it? Yes, it has to be filed within a year of granting it. And your family has to adjust to permanent residence before you naturalize. Do not naturalize and when your family's in asylum status, or that's going to be a problem. We had that happen once to somebody, and they had to then petition for the child. So that is all today for notable approvals. If you want to see more, you can go to our Facebook page. I had an asylum case yesterday I talked about. Like us, follow us on Facebook so you don't miss them in the future. I'll be back tomorrow with another interesting notable approval for you. I haven't picked the topic. It might be asylum again. I might be setting this up to do a live question and answer discussion on asylum. If you would like us to, let me know, because I haven't decided yet. But regardless, join us next time. We'll see you tomorrow, and thanks for watching.